Moscow, Idaho. A small college town tucked between hills and fields, where people leave their doors unlocked and wave to their neighbors. It was the kind of place where nothing truly bad ever seemed to happen. At least, that's what everyone believed. Until November 13th, 2022. 4 students from the University of Idaho. Zana, Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, young, full of life, smiling in every picture, laughing on every Instagram story. To the outside world, their lives seemed like a college dream. Shared houses, late-night parties, TikToks, coffee shops, and plans for the future. That Saturday night was supposed to be just like any other. Maddie and Kaylee went out to a bar, laughing, posing for photos. Ethan and Zana were at a fraternity house just down the road. By 2 a.m., they were all back home. Lights off, doors locked. The house on King Road settled into silence, but something, or someone, was already watching. What happened next? No one was ready for. In the early morning hours, a figure moved through the darkness. Inside that house were 6 people. By sunrise, 4 of them would never wake up again. The details of that night are still blurred by fear and secrecy. Some say the killer knew exactly where to go. Some say it couldn't have been random. What we know for certain is this: there was no forced entry. The attacks were brutal, fast, silent, and for hours. No one outside those walls had any idea what had happened inside. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call would shatter the calm of Moscow forever. Inside the house, police would discover a scene so horrifying, officers could barely speak afterward. One night, 4 lives stolen, a small town haunted, and at the center of it all, a man no one expected. What happens next will shock you. Sunday, November 13th, 2022. The sun rose over Moscow, Idaho, as if nothing had happened. Students slept in after a night out. Parents texted good morning. Coffee brewed in kitchens across the neighborhood. But on King Road, there was only silence. 2 of the 6 people inside that house were still alive. They didn't yet understand what was behind those closed bedroom doors. They thought their friends were still sleeping. They had no reason to believe otherwise. At 11:58 a.m., a call was placed to 911. Reports would later say it was about an unconscious person. What officers found when they entered the home was something they would never forget. The rooms told the story in blood. Upstairs and downstairs, lives brutally taken, as if time had stopped in the middle of the night. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign of robbery, just death. It wasn't long before the first words spread through the quiet town. 4 students dead. Rumors spiraled fast. A gas leak? A murder-suicide? Something even worse? Parents panicked. Friends texted each other in terror. Reporters showed up almost instantly. But the police said little. They wouldn't share details. Not yet. Behind the scenes, investigators were already piecing together what they could. Who could have done something so violent, so deliberate, and leave without a trace? Why these 4? Why this house? And why did the killer leave 2 people alive? Neighbors described hearing nothing unusual. But one officer on the scene said this quietly to a colleague: "It's the silence that's the loudest." Outside, yellow police tape wrapped around the house like a terrible secret trying to hold itself in. Inside, families would soon receive the calls no parent should ever get. Your child is gone. And somewhere, the killer was still free. What happens next will pull you deeper into the darkness. For weeks, the town of Moscow lived in fear. Parents pulled their children from classes. Students refused to walk alone. Police held back details. The killer, they warned, might still be out there. The media called it the Idaho 4. 4 young lives stolen in one night. No suspect, no motive, just questions and whispers. Then, in late December, the news broke. An arrest. His name meant nothing to most at first. Bryan Kohberger, 28 years old, a PhD student studying criminology, just a short drive away at Washington State University. He wasn't a local. He had no connection to the victims, or so people thought. But behind the scenes, investigators had been watching him for weeks. A white Hyundai Elantra, the same make and model seen near King Road that night. Cellphone records. DNA left on a knife sheath found near one of the bodies. A quiet pattern of behavior that suddenly seemed sinister. Neighbors said Bryan was odd, always watching, always listening. Some students said he asked unsettling questions in class, about murder, about how killers think, about how police catch them. And now, he was in handcuffs. People couldn't believe it. He didn't look like a monster. But behind cold eyes was a man who had allegedly studied crime, not to understand it, but to perfect it. What haunted people most wasn't just what he did. It was how long he watched, how carefully he planned, and how close he'd gotten to pulling it off. Police said he drove back past the house, hours later, as if checking his work. The question on everyone's lips. Why? Why them? Why that house? Even now he hasn't answered. But inside a courtroom, those families would soon face the man accused of stealing everything from them. The courtroom was silent, not out of respect, out of something colder. Fear, grief, anger too deep for words. When Bryan Kohberger entered in shackles, he didn't look up. His face was blank, unreadable, but the faces staring back at him were filled with pain. The parents of Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zana sat just feet away. 4 families, broken in different ways, but united by the same unbearable question. Why? Reporters lined the benches, pens ready, cameras waiting. Outside, crowds gathered in the freezing air, holding signs that read, "Justice for the Idaho 4." Remember their names. Inside, the prosecution laid out the facts like shards of glass. DNA on the knife sheath. Cell phone pings placing Kohberger near the house again and again. A car matching his, caught on camera just minutes after the murders. A man obsessed with the criminal mind, but careless enough to leave a trace. Still, Bryan said nothing. His lawyers spoke for him. Not guilty, they pleaded. Not now. Not ever. But in the gallery, Kaylee's mother wept. When asked later what it felt like to see him in person, she said quietly, like looking at a void where a human soul should be. Some moments hung heavy in that room. The reading of the charges, 4 counts of first-degree murder. The statements from detectives who had walked through that blood-stained house. The words of a father who could barely speak. You took my daughter's future. You took our hearts. Yet through it all, Kohberger barely moved. No apology, no sign of remorse. Only the cold process of the law, grinding forward like winter itself. Outside, people asked, how long before justice is done? Inside, the families wondered, can there ever truly be justice for this? But one thing was certain, the story wasn't over yet. Moscow, Idaho is quiet again, but not in the way it used to be. The house on King Road sits empty, its windows boarded, its doors locked forever. Some want it torn down. Some want it to stand as a warning. Most just want to forget. But forgetting isn't easy. Not for the families. Not for a town that will never feel truly safe again. The parents speak now at fundraisers, at interviews, in court. They speak because their children no longer can. About Kaylee's laughter, about Maddie's kindness, about Ethan's bright future, about Zana's quiet strength, about the lives that should have stretched on for decades, stolen in minutes. They speak because they have to, because there is no justice unless someone fights for it. The trial drags on, delays, motions, arguments. Each hearing reopens wounds that never really healed. America watches, some out of curiosity, some out of fear. But mothers watch differently now. Fathers double lock their doors. Because if it could happen here, It could happen anywhere. People ask, how do you heal from something like this? The truth is, you don't. Not fully. You learn to live with the empty chairs at family dinners. You learn to carry the birthdays that will never come. You learn to hold on to hope. Not for what was lost, but for what might still be saved. And slowly, painfully, you turn grief into strength. You speak their names. You tell their stories. You refuse to let darkness have the last word. The Idaho Four will not be forgotten. Their light, however brief, will outlast the shadows. Because some stories end not in fear, but in the fight for justice.